I'll tell you how. We're gonna fly.
The Angry Birds movie gets a lot of hate. It's got only a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 2.6 on Letterboxd, and most video essays you'll watch about it here on YouTube sort of paint it in a negative light, kind of criticizing it of being a bad animated movie, you know, the same caliber as the Emoji Movie or the Boss Baby. But for me, it's genuinely and unironically one of my favorite films ever. I've seen it more times than I can count. I can quote the whole thing from front to back, and I listen to the score whenever I write essays for school or other video scripts. It was a hit when it came out, grossing $352 million worldwide and becoming the highest grossing video game adaptation at that point in history. But in the 9 years since this first movie's release, the Angry Birds franchise as a whole has declined into obscurity due to a series of bad decisions by the Rovio company. And with it, the legacy of its first film has been lost like keys in the sofa of popular culture. So that's why I really wanted to make my own video essay on this movie. Not only to paint it in a positive light for once that disproves the obnoxious film Twitter snobs who put down competent works of art for the validation of others, but to sort of hype this up as the first video game adaptation to pay honest tribute to the game it's based on. Really, there's a lot to talk about with how much I love this movie. It functions just as well as a tribute to its source material as it does its own accessible story that anybody can connect with. So I'm splitting this video up into little chunks to break down why the Angry Birds movie is, in fact, peak cinema. But before we slingshot into the sucker, if you're new to the channel, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications, and join me down below in the comments section. I also want to specify here that everything I say in this video is completely my opinion. None of this is fact. It's all based on what I think. So naturally, a lot of you are going to disagree with it, and that's fine. That's why I'm encouraging all of you to join me in the comments and let me know what your thoughts on the Angry Birds movie are. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get this party started! The original Angry Birds movie is the greatest video game adaptation of all time. Yes, it's better than Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and the Mario movie is extremely mid, sorry.
Meow.
Really, 99% of video game movies are extremely self-conscious of what they are and disregard their source material in some way, shape, or form. And while this genre has certainly improved with this as time has gone on, studio interference and misguided creative decisions often restrict these stories from becoming the films they were meant to be. They commonly don't feel confident enough in the world of the game to carry its own story, so they often force in some kind of awkward relationship with the real world. Mario and Luigi are from Brooklyn, Sonic comes to the real world, and then the upcoming Minecraft movie does the same sort of crap, isekaiing Jason Momoa into an Uncanny Valley CGI environment. I'm not saying this immediately discredits a movie. Like, the Sonic movies are still awesome, but it did honestly take this franchise a little bit to completely find its footing. And back in 2020, I thought the first film would have been way better if they kept it fully animated and set entirely in Sonic's world. Angry Birds, however, avoids this pitfall entirely. It just drops its audience into the wonderful worlds of Bird Island and Piggy Island with minimal exposition or inherent awkwardness of stationing an animated red next to some dumb live-action actor. It really just takes everything that works about the Angry Birds game and puts it to the big screen. And another place this is extremely evident is with the fantastic casting. To be fair, the original Angry Birds aren't super complex or anything, so it's pretty hard to mess up casting them, but they exude so much personality in the tunes, and the actors chosen for the movie do an excellent job applying speech to these pre-established mannerisms. I'm honestly struggling to think of anyone who'd fit Bomb better than Danny McBride. Josh Gad playing the incredibly flamboyant, over-the-top ADHD bird is a match made in heaven, and there's still something so incredibly fitting about Bill Hader saying,
I am a pig.
Tons of VGMs seem like they're made by people who've never played a second of the game they're adapting, but not Angry Birds. It doesn't just throw Jack Black at it and call it a day, nor does it make extreme logic jumps to justify Chris Pratt doing an incredibly cringy Italian accent. All the actors portray their characters super naturally, and really, it's a ton of fun. Now, these are all things that prove it to be a solid and faithful adaptation, but I understand that this may not be enough to prove it being the best video game movie ever from an artistic standpoint, which is why from here on out, the rest of the video is going to be dedicated to why it works just as well as its own movie as it does as an Angry Birds movie. So buckle up, because it's going to be awesome. Like most animated movies, Angry Birds is one of those films where you can really see how much care and detail was put into the background and character designs. The Angry Birds in the games and tunes are extremely simplistic, as they're just, little balls. So what the movie had to do was expand upon this to make them maneuverable for a cinematic plot by adapting them to more human features. And it's not as simple as just giving these guys arms and legs and calling it a day. There's a certain level of precise talent required to detail these iconic designs while still maintaining the vibe they get across through their charming simplicity. And the movie renditions of the birds have arguably grown to be just as iconic as the ones in the game. Really, this film just builds a whole universe, and all around it just teems with personality. The imperfections in the architecture, the posters in the background, everything makes this world just feel so lived in. The constructions of both the birds and the pigs, you can only imagine being made by them respectively, just because of how supplementally they get across their cultural styles. This movie really sells the idea of coming from its own isolated territory far removed from what we as humans are used to seeing, and it gets that across with some beautiful surreality. Then the animation, while not groundbreaking by any means, is still very visually stimulating. The best way to describe it is eye-popping. It never feels bland, as really every frame is just bursting with color, and it truly makes the story come to life. I also want to mention that it's a movie that utilizes popular music very well, through both its needle drops and its original songs. It's really a time capsule to 2016 with the fun assortment of artists they got on the compilation album. You got Steve Aoki putting together an instrumental EDM banger, Blake Shelton delivering a high-energy country earworm, Matoma making a super happy pop tune, and pre-Brat Charlie XCX dropping a dance rock party track that I just absolutely love. Then they also dug up two older rock songs, Paranoid by Black Sabbath and Behind Blue Eyes by Limp Bizkit, which both add to the characterization of Red via strong montages. Both songs show a different side of him, Paranoid introducing him as the angry asshole, then Behind Blue Eyes elaborating more on his inner sensitivity and his desire to fit in as he's only misunderstood. But if there's any quality of this movie that deserves an infinite amount of artistic praise, it's the magnificent score by Heitor Pereira. Heitor is really one of the most talented and underrated composers to work in the medium of animation. He did the Despicable Me score with Pharrell, all the awesome music in Puss in Boots 2 is his, and the only reason he isn't really as hyped up as musicians like John Powell or Michael Giacchino is because he always gets stuck on crappy movies like The Smurfs or Nut Job 2. He had no need to cook so hard for the Angry Birds score, but I'm really glad he did. Like, just listen to this. It's so sweeping with how much it just elevates my soul. And he really puts everything into making this music feel alive, adding plenty of fun little horns, bird whistles, and other random sounds in there to flavor up this movie's atmosphere. It's kind of like a John Williams Star Wars score in a way, because he gives each character a motif that reprises throughout the entire narrative. There's a theme for Leonard, Terrence, Mighty Eagle, Chuck, the pigs as a whole, Red, everybody, man. If you really want an idea for how much this guy ate, listen to the tracks Risky Idea and Nothing Like a Statue. Both are awesome in different ways and really sum up the full scale of this score's greatness, so be sure to check them out. The whole presentation of this movie is super cool. From its design, to its animation, to the heavenly melodic sounds driving home the emotions of the characters, it really builds an aesthetic that keeps me coming back to it. But this movie's also got some amazing substance to go along with this splendid style. This next part of the video is gonna sound crazy, but hear me out. The Angry Birds movie is a social commentary on how radical views aren't good for society, and for communities to progress, opposing sides need to learn to embrace each other's differences. While I don't think this metaphor is as deeply rooted and one-to-one with current events as, this interesting individual, there's still something meaningful this movie's trying to say, if you choose to listen for it. Its message leans into the idea of open-mindedness and the social nirvana found through more balanced perspectives. When the pigs show up, Red is extremely suspicious of them, and Judge Peckinpah immediately shoots down his superstitions in a desperate attempt to prove him wrong because he has a different ideology than him. But this ends up getting the whole community's unborn children stolen, and if they weren't immediately closed off to Red's point of view, this tragedy could have been avoided. So it's when they learn that there are appropriate moments to embrace their negative emotions and utilize them as fuel to fight back against the pigs, they save all their kids despite their technological disadvantage. But it's not one-sided with this theme either, because Red himself is constantly at fault due to strongly tying himself to his immediate responses. Through his entire life, Red retaliates at negative situations with anger, and it never gets him anywhere. So, much like how the island around him has to learn when to use anger, Red has to learn when not to use anger. And it's when he finally gets the best of his emotions, instead of letting his emotions get the best of him, that he outsmarts King Mudbeard and wins the Battle of Piggy Island. Now tell me, What idea in the Mario movie, Uncharted, Detective Pikachu, or any other video game adaptation is as universally resonant or as sophisticated as that? Sonic 3 does make a potent statement on grief and the way an individual's support system can mold and shape the way they recover from traumatic events. And you could argue it's more emotionally effective than the message in Angry Birds, but it doesn't give you any sort of sentiment that you can take to heart and potentially live life with going forward. So that's one of the biggest reasons why this movie's always really spoken to me. It's able to have kind of deeper, poignant, and sophisticated themes for a kid's movie while also having this really funny, wacky, totally memorable, bizarre stuff. Which brings me to the next thing I'm going to talk about. This is going to be a relatively shorter part of the video because I understand comedy is incredibly subjective. Take Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, for instance. A lot of you think that movie's hilarious, but aside from Kieran Culkin's character, 0% of its aggressively monotone humor gets a laugh at him. Angie Boards, though? Maximum funny. In all seriousness, though, the cast is just stacked with comedic talent. You got Bill Hader, Josh Gad, Jason Sudeikis, Maya Rudolph, Peter Dinklage, Danny McBride, and the guys from Smosh. They all totally commit to these roles and fully sell their jokes and remarks off of the line delivery alone. The overarching gags in this movie that occupy the momentum of an entire scene are almost like songs in a musical for how they build and pile on before reaching these profound gravitases upon their conclusions. Like Chuck and Bomb driving Red insane while practicing their battle cries for hours on end only before the amazing punchline of them realizing they've been climbing the wrong mountain just kills me every time. And I honestly don't know why people still try being funny when we all know that comedy peaked in 2016 with Chuck and Bomb being broken upon the revelation that they've been swimming around in Mighty Eagle's urine. But the most amazingly baffling thing about this movie's attempts at laughs is how many supplemental adult jokes they slipped in there. It's like Shrek, but way less subtle. Cue the montage.
Pluck my life.
Ladies, get busy!
Nuh-uh, no means no. You guys ever thought about bird control? Peekaboo. That's my toothbrush. Get it out.
We're gonna be laying some eggs tonight!
I don't want to know what he does in the creek.
I do.
You're welcome.
Drop your nuts and move your butts!
Okay, maybe it wasn't ice cream.
I can't hold it against you if you find this movie unfunny and stupid. You do you, but like, this is one of my most quoted films for a reason. But I think the best thing about this movie actually is Red is kind of the perfect protagonist, as he has a strong arc that I think anyone can connect with. He starts out hating everybody around him, always getting into fights, shrugging off anyone's attempts at being nice to him, and avoiding social situations. But it's during the Behind Blue Eyes montage where we really understand the reason he's rejected everybody's whole life is because everyone's rejected him his whole life. He wants to fit in, he wants to have friends in a community that cares about him, but he can't admit that to anyone, even himself. Because what's the use in trying when you've been screwed over way too many times? Red never vocally expresses this, and the movie doesn't talk down to its audience. It gets all these human emotions across through powerful imagery and visual storytelling when lesser movies just have their characters rant at the camera. But back to the plot, it's at this point that something crazy happens. Red's hero, the one person he looked up to, refuses to help him, so really he's the only one willing to take on the responsibility of helping these birds that he's so alienated with. It's in becoming the leader he's meant to be, in conquering his emotions, that he finally lets others into his life. And that beautifully bittersweet moment where he's welcomed back into the village is overwhelmingly powerful, as you're right there in Red's shoes, feeling the full spectrum of emotions with him. Now let's look at movie Mario. What vital flaw as a person does he gain control of by the end of the story? What inner conflicts does he need to tame? What's the moral his adventure teaches that the audience can walk away with and potentially develop a new outlook on life? Mario not being taken seriously and proving everybody wrong isn't him growing as a person. The message of that story is buy more Switch games and go to Super Nintendo World. I mean, it worked on me, but like, that's not what movies are supposed to do. While the Sonic movies have great development, it's not like any major arc can be undergone when the movie's only a stepping stone in a major series and you have to leave room for improvement in the sequel. The arc in Angry Birds is super strong, poignant, and relatable, and it never tells you any of this stuff straight up. It assumes the viewer's intelligent and conveys its ideas through indirect characterization and visual rhetoric. And that is why it's the greatest motion picture ever made. And I'm only partially exaggerating there. In my opinion, the Angry Birds movie is really overhated. And if you despise it with every fiber of your being, I can't hold that against you. But I will ask you this. Did you ever give the movie a chance? Did you put it on with an open mind, or did you take one look at the poster and instantly write it off as a dumb kid's flick? Because, newsflash, if you go into something wanting to hate it, then you're gonna hate it. Really, it's one of those movies that knows what it is. It fully runs out the boundless potential of its tone and story and succeeds at what it sets out to do in fully becoming the movie it was meant to be. Unlike its sequel, which is complete and utter dog shit and doesn't want anything to do with its source material and thinks kids are stupid. Another topic for another video, I guess. But yeah, I just love the Angry Birds movie. It's my most rewatched film of all time. I jump out of my couch like it's the Super Bowl during all the hype moments and the final battle, and I'll never not laugh at every last joke it has to offer. If you adore this beautiful piece of animation history like I do, then I hope you've enjoyed this video in relating to a lot of the praises I've sung. But if you hate this movie and clicked on this video with a grimace on your face, then I'm hoping I've convinced you to try revisiting the movie and maybe attempting to see in it what I do. It's on Netflix right now, it's leaving soon, and I don't know where it's going, but hey, if you got 90 minutes to kill, why not? But that's gonna have to wrap it up for this video, I say. Be sure to tell me what you think of the Angry Birds movie in the comments down below. And once again, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications so you can see when new videos are coming out. Got a bunch of awesome projects cooking up right now. I'm thinking of doing something on my top 20 favorite movies, and there's some more movies that I want to make full video essays on. And if you have any ideas for topics you want to see us cover in future videos, any video games, movies, TV shows, pieces of media that you love, let us know in the comments, and we'd love to share our takes. But that's all I got, folks. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, I will see you on the flip side.